Funding for the production of Louisiana, the State We're In, is provided in part by the Ziegler Foundation of Jennings and Gulf States Utilities, helping Louisiana bridge the gap to our energy future.
For the first time in more than 2 decades, Louisiana has executed a convicted murderer. This week, Robert Wayne Williams paid for his crime with his own life, but he insisted until the very end that the murder he committed was an accident.
At the state capitol this week, years of feuding came to an end with a compromise plan creating Louisiana's first black majority congressional district.
Well, I think it's a great conclusion to an effort that should have been concluded some 2 years ago.
Also this week, the legislature wrapped up its special session by raising taxes. It wasn't something lawmakers wanted to do right before Christmas, but faced with a budget deficit of more than $200 billion, they say they had no choice.
Good evening, I'm Beth George Courtney.
And I'm Ken Johnson. Thanks for joining us tonight for this edition of Louisiana, the State We're In.
This was a week of history-setting news in Louisiana. The legislature meeting in special session created the first ever black majority congressional district in Louisiana and also invited black activist presidential candidate, the Reverend Jesse Jackson, to address a joint session of the legislature, something of a first in itself. This week also marked the first time in more than 20 years that the state has executed anyone for a capital crime. Tonight we will have in-depth stories on the legislative special session and the execution of Robert Wayne Williams. But first, a look at some of the other stories this week making news.
Beth, this week, the 5th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals upheld a controversial desegregation order imposed in 1982 on Baton Rouge's 110 public schools. The latest ruling in this 27-year-old ongoing school desegregation case affirmed a system that integrated middle and high schools by establishing so-called feeder patterns. The Fifth Circuit said this system would effectively eliminate all one-race middle schools and all but 2 one-race high schools. The court also agreed with another judge's ruling, refusing to allow a group of parents to intervene in the suit. Meanwhile, also this week, the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education, bowing to public pressure, postponed a vote on a controversial plan that would make it tougher to get a high school diploma here in Louisiana. Under the new plan, the state would stiffen requirements in English, mathematics, and science and reduce the number of elective courses students may take. Students would also be required to take at least 2 years of a foreign language in order to graduate. Critics argue the state is having trouble now finding qualified teachers, particularly in math and science. The BC Board will vote on the new plan on January 25th.
In one of the largest court settlements of its kind this week, 10 major oil and petrochemical companies agreed to pay $50 million to clean up 2 abandoned chemical waste dumps near Baton Rouge. Exxon International, U.S. Steel, and Dow Chemical are among the firms agreeing to pay for the cleanup and also to begin a 30-year monitoring program to guard against possible leaks into underground water supplies. The settlement ends one of the biggest environmental cases ever filed by the government. The 2 sites, located at Brook Lawn and Scenic Highway in Baton Rouge, contain about 19 million gallons of hazardous material and another 1 million tons of toxic sludge. An official of the 1984 World's Fair says work on the huge U.S. pavilion is behind schedule, despite earlier assurances that construction was moving ahead on time. Originally, the pavilion was scheduled to be completed by February 1st, but now there's word it may not be ready until April 23rd. The fair itself will open on May 12th. Many exhibitors say they need at least a month to set up their displays. Fair officials say they have warned the chief contractor, J.A. Jones, to step up the pace so the pavilion will be finished in time for the opening of the fair.
A freak snowstorm paralyzed the Shreveport area today, disrupting traffic and forcing schools to close early. About 2 inches of snow blanketed the area, leaving many roads like sheets of ice. Police report numerous accidents. At least 2 people were killed in a car wreck just north of Shreveport on Highway 71. Figures released this week by the United States Labor Department show that Louisiana had the 5th highest unemployment rate in the country for the month of October. West Virginia, hard hit by a dramatic decline in demand for coal, had the highest unemployment. Following close behind were Michigan, Alabama, Mississippi, then Louisiana, and Ohio.
Well, Democratic presidential candidate Jesse Jackson addressed the nation's economic problems this week during a speech to a joint session of the legislature. Jackson called on lawmakers for support of his Rainbow Coalition, saying that the answer to many of the country's problems lies in cooperation among people of all races.
We need solutions. We need to solve our problems. More than anything else, we need unity. Unity without integrity is a cover-up. We must have a genuine unity. The only way that we can achieve unity is to come together and to find what we have in common. So the struggle today is a search not so much for programs that are sound, but a search, black and white, red and yellow, south and north, east and west. What is our common ground?
This week, for the first time in more than 2 decades, Louisiana executed a convicted murderer. Correspondent Robyn Ekings was at Angola to cover the story for LPB. Tonight she joins us on the set.
Thank you, Ken. Convicted murderer Robert Wayne Williams arrived at his date with Louisiana's electric chair this week, insisting the death of his victim was an accident. A Baton Rouge jury and many other courts, including the United States Supreme Court, disagreed. After 4 years of appeals attempting to reverse his conviction for the 1979 shotgun slaying of a Baton Rouge security guard during a supermarket robbery, Williams ran out of ways to delay or escape his date with death. Early Wednesday morning, Williams became the first person to die in Louisiana's electric chair in 22 years.
On December 14, 1983, in conformity with the death warrant issued by the Honorable Frank Fall, Judge, 19th Judicial District Court, Division B, Parish of East Baton Rouge, State of Louisiana, Robert Wayne Williams was executed at the Louisiana State Penitentiary, Angola, Louisiana, by passing through his body a current of electricity sufficient in intensity and duration to cause death.
It was the end of a long, winding legal path for Robert Wayne Williams. Over the past 4 years, Williams' death sentence for the 1979 shotgun slaying of a Baton Rouge security guard had been set 8 times. 7 of those dates with death came and went, as pleas to reconsider the punishment were heard, then rejected by state and federal courts. The 31-year-old condemned killer approached his 8th date with the electric chair, continuing to claim he was a victim of an unjust system.
You got cases in Baton Rouge that dudes stab people up 4, 5 times, 7, 8, 9 times. Somebody cut up their bodies and things. Well, with first-degree indictments and turn around, you know, the public never hear about it because they was able to cop out to second degree or manslaughter, or they went to trial, they got second degree when they went to trial, you know. So what I'm saying, if you take mine and give me the death sentence like that, why wasn't the rest of the cases took and pursued, you know, the death sentence? If they say the death sentence is a deterrent. It never will be a deterrent as long as it's handed out unfairly.
With all the legal appeals nearly exhausted, Williams turned to the Louisiana Board of Pardons in his final days. His request for a life sentence was denied.
The purpose of this hearing today is an attempt on the part of Mr. Williams and his attorney to get this board to interject yourself into the system and try to get you to take this matter under advisement so that he can use this fact that it is pending to gain another stay of execution for his client, which is due December the 14th. I'm asking you as members of the Board of Pardons, don't let them sucker you in to interfering with the orderly process of law as handed down by our court.
I pray to forgive. But my father's gone. And I think in the manner in which he was killed, I think that somebody should have to pay.
We begin our opening prayer with a reading from the Hebrew Scriptures, Psalm 40.
With the midnight hour of the execution approaching, opponents of the death penalty gathered on the lawn of the governor's mansion in Baton Rouge. That afternoon, Governor Dave Treen had refused to stay the execution or commute Williams' sentence.
I think the primary reasons he may die tonight is that he's poor and he's black and he was unlucky I think the fourth reason is that he happened to commit a terrible crime, that if I had done that exact same crime, I would not be on death row. And on 4 different occasions, he's come within a single vote of having a different outcome in his case. But it's not a clear-cut case where, everyone agrees this person should die.
We feel strongly that the increase in violence in this country is not going to be fought by the death penalty. We believe that the death penalty is not a deterrent, and we are distressed to see the United States join countries like the Soviet Union, South Africa, and Iran in sentencing to death large numbers of people.
The group later moved to the gates of the state penitentiary at Angola, where the execution would take place. There, they were joined by members of the Williams family.
I feel that my family has just been used and abused by the decision of the courts. And I say this not with hatred in my heart, but with regret that the state would allow such a thing to go on in the name of justice.
Beyond the walls, preparations were being made to carry out Louisiana's first execution in 22 years. Witnesses required to carry out the sentence boarded a bus for the death house. Shortly before midnight, Governor Treen ordered a 1-hour delay, while attorneys for Williams made one final appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court. That appeal was rejected. Reporters who had witnessed the execution described Williams' final moments and read a statement given by Williams just before he had been strapped into the chair.
I believe and feel deeply in my heart that God has come into my life and saved me. I told the truth about what happened. If my death do happen, I would like it to be a remembrance for Louisiana and the whole country that would be a deterrence against capital punishment and show that capital punishment is no good and never has been good. I would like all the people who fought against capital punishment to keep on fighting, not just on my behalf, but on the behalf of everyone else.
They brought him in we figured at 1:01, there's a clock. We were looking straight at Williams and the clock. They brought him in at 1:01. He made his statement. At 1:02, they began putting him in the chair. He said something briefly to Warden Maggio, and Williams said something to him. We don't know what that was. It appeared there were 4 separate jolts of electricity. John Hill timed it, and we believe it took 1 minute and 10 seconds.
I would describe him as very impassive. He read his statement. He showed no emotion, and he sat down as they strapped him, and they strapped the man in the chair. He has straps in his forearms, and
there were 8 separate straps.
8 separate straps. He was immobilized. They strapped his chin back against the chair in this fashion, so he cannot move. The way we were able to tell how long the electricity was working was because of the contractions of his muscular structure.
Ambulance carrying Williams' body silently slipped away from the death house, headed for a local hospital. For the only person who could, in the final moments, have given Robert Wayne Williams his request for life instead of death, it was a troubling event.
It was a difficult personal decision for me because a human life is involved. On the issues, after reviewing the record and finding that there was no miscarriage of justice, in my opinion, anywhere along the process, then on the question, the overall basic question of deterrence, capital punishment as a means to try to deter crime, didn't have a lot of problem with that. But of course I had problems with the fact that a human being was going to have his life terminated at the hands of the state.
30 more men on Louisiana's death row face the prospect of following Robert Wayne Williams to Louisiana's electric chair. Although the legal path to the chair may remain long and winding, it will not be as easy to forget what lies at the end of that road.
Well, the news of the Williams execution overshadowed some major developments this week in Baton Rouge. The legislature ended years of feuding by approving a black majority congressional district for New Orleans, the first such district in Louisiana history. Now that the congressional boundary lines have been set, the next big question is who will be the candidates in the next year's congressional elections.
For the first time in history, Louisiana now has a black majority congressional district. But many political analysts say that doesn't necessarily mean a black will automatically be elected to Congress. This week, the legislature, during its special session, gave final approval to a redistricting plan that creates a black majority district in New Orleans and makes extensive changes in all 3 New Orleans area congressional districts. The plan was approved overwhelmingly and sent on to Governor Dave Treen for his signature. But Treen, a Republican, has been somewhat cool to the plan because it makes drastic changes in the 1st District of fellow Republican Representative Bob Livingston. Still, the governor said he intends to sign the bill, ending a tug-of-war over the districts that has been going on since the 1980 census. The problems began when a class-action suit by a group of blacks successfully challenged the original congressional reapportionment plan passed by the legislature in 1980. They claimed it was racially discriminatory because it did not contain a black majority district in the New Orleans area. A federal court agreed and ordered the legislature to redraw the boundaries by January 31st.
Well, I think it's a great conclusion to an effort that should have been concluded some 2 years ago. I think for sure it complies with the court decision, which simply said that New Orleans, having a concentration of black people that made a majority within one political unit, should not be divided into 2 congressional districts, because to do that diluted the voting strength of that concentrated black vote in one political unit. So what we've done is to keep the vote concentrated in one district, and consequently we comply with the aspect of the decision that requires that we not dilute the concentrated majority of black vote. On the other hand, the other constitutional requirement is that the deviations be correct. That is to say that every district is roughly equal to every other district, and we are very well within the deviation requirements, so we should have no trouble with the courts whatsoever. And we've reached a good political accommodation for the Jefferson Parish people and the Orleans Parish interest.
Now, under the compromise reapportionment plan, the new boundary lines throw the homes of U.S. Representatives Lindy Boggs and Bob Livingston into the new 2nd District, a district in which 53% of the voting power is in the hands of blacks. Ms. Boggs says she is satisfied with the plan and intends to run for re-election next year, but she may have a major black opponent. Those most frequently mentioned for her seat include State Representatives John Johnson and Johnny Jackson Jr. and State Senator Henry Braden. But Braden, like State Representative Lee Frazier, says he won't consider running unless Mrs. Boggs steps down.
Well, I think, in all honesty, the incumbent has been a mighty force for social change, has been a mighty force for equality, has been the kind of representative that I think everyone would want to have. And I think it's important that we recognize that the candidate or the elected official should be there to represent all of the people. And I say unequivocally that if Representative Lindy Boggs decided to run again, she will be elected again, and I will be working toward her candidacy. A person of that stature or anyone like her is the kind of person that you look past racial or sexual lines, and you ought to. I hope that if I'm fortunate enough to be considered a candidate in that seat, and hopefully elected, that I will be looked upon as a candidate past being male or past being black that can represent all of the people. She's been a tremendous model, I think, for all of us.
Congressman Livingston, on the other hand, says he intends to run in the new 1st District, although it contains few of the voters which have sent him to Capitol Hill since 1977.
I get an 80% new area, and I want to say that, frankly, I couldn't dream up an 80% better district with the new territory that I've picked up. I'm not unfamiliar with the area that I pick up. I went to grade school and high school in Jefferson Parish. I worked at Avondale for 6 summers. And when you consider the demographics and the voting patterns of Jefferson Parish combined with St. Tammany Parish, which is my new area, the fact that Reagan beat Carter by 68% of the vote, the fact that Treen beat Lambert by 67% of the vote, and even in the last election, Governor Treen beat Governor Edwards by 55% of the vote, 2 parishes that went for Treen. I'd say that you'd have to conclude that this area that I have now is compatible with my philosophy and in keeping with the type of area that I have enjoyed representing in the past.
By moving to the 1st District, Livingston avoids a bitter battle with Congresswoman Boggs. Most experts say he should win easily in the new 1st District. Ms. Boggs, on the other hand, will probably face stiff opposition from one or more black candidates. But she, too, is expected to win re-election. But only insiders say if she assures black leaders privately that the next term will be her last term. For legislators meeting this week in Baton Rouge for the special session, this holiday season has had its ups and downs. On the upside, lawmakers were able to take action to avoid threatened major cuts in spending to balance the state budget. But on the downside, they had to do it by raising taxes. The legislature adjourned this week after voting to restore most of the cut in state income taxes it approved 3 years ago. For most of us, that will mean smaller refund checks in the new year. But as correspondent Robyn Ekings reports tonight, this latest tax increase probably won't be the only increase we'll be seeing in 1984.
Outside is outside. The House will come down. The recess is over.
In a way, the Christmas spirit was present as legislators convened for a special session. In what was most likely his last address to a joint session of the legislature, Governor Dave Treen asked lawmakers to help balance a state budget that had run into the red. In the end, most legislators decided it would be better to give the people of Louisiana a tax increase than to receive the wrath of constituents, local and state officials in the wake of a 5.8% cut in state spending ordered by Governor Treen. In his opening address, Governor Treen gave legislators several options to raise money and avoid the budget cut. The governor's plan seemed to have little support, however, until an unlikely ally joined the lobbying team. Governor-elect Edwin Edwards provided the persuasive powers needed to help Governor Treen get his largest tax proposal through. Edwards had little trouble convincing House Ways and Means Committee members to restore most of a cut in state income taxes granted by the legislature 3 years ago.
At the very least, and as a matter of good judgment and responsible government, I think the passage of this bill is mandated.
The combined muscle of the outgoing and incoming administrations gave the tax plan the strength to gain more than the 2/3 majority vote needed in both houses. The easy victory, however, did not leave everybody happy.
You know how many people actually appeared in opposition to this tax in the Ways and Means Committee? Mr. Thiel was there for information, more or less. Nobody. Nobody was there in opposition to this tax. You know why? Because the middle-income people in this country and in this state can't afford a lobbyist, and this is who you're socking it to.
This is part of the philosophy of tax and tax, spend and spend. We've seen what different state agencies need, but what we haven't seen is what will not be purchased with the tax dollars that we take out of the pockets of the citizens of our state. We're not being told today about the groceries that won't be bought, about the rent that won't be paid, about the car notes that won't be met, about the Christmas presents that can't be bought, about the light bills that can't be paid and the water bills that can't be met. The private sector in our state deserves some consideration too.
Restoration of most of the 1980 personal income tax cut will mean $136 million more for the state this fiscal year. It will help cover most of the deficit in the budget, avoiding a major cut in state spending. Yet, even with the new tax, Governor Treen has had to order $44 million in spending cuts to balance the budget. For the average taxpayer, the increase will apply to the entire 1983 tax year and will mean a smaller refund check. In the middle income bracket, the state will probably be getting an average of 50 to 80% more in personal income taxes. While many legislators may have left Baton Rouge this week satisfied that the books are nearly balanced, most admit the spring regular legislative session will bring more of the same. Governor-elect Edwards is working on a proposal to fund many of the promises he made on the campaign trail, from state employee pay raises to better roads and drainage systems. Baton Rouge Representative Richard Baker has already begun lobbying his colleagues for support of a 3-point tax plan to raise money for badly needed road improvements and flood control projects. The package would raise $200 million a year. It includes a 3-cent tax on a gallon of gasoline, a half-cent per gallon tax on fuel refined in Louisiana, and a property tax for motor vehicles.
I'm hoping that officials at the local level will want to respond and get involved favorably, giving their support for these proposals. I think that's the only way a legislative initiative can pass. If you wait till the last minute, try to spring it on the House floor, I don't think I'd have much success.
Why the particular taxes that you selected?
I think these are reasonably related to the projects we're going to be building. The repeal of the gas tax exemption is a motor fuel, adding a refinery charge for the motor fuels which are refined within the Louisiana boundaries, and then the additional charge for the operation of a vehicle on state highways all make sense to me in relation to who's going to be paying the fees to build new highways.
Exactly how much the state may need in new revenue depends heavily on what the state's economy does. This week, LSU economics professor Lauren Scott had some good news and some bad news about that. Scott has projected the trend of Louisiana's economy through 1985, based in part on what's been predicted for the national economy. The good news, more people should begin going back to work in the new year. They'll have more money to spend, says Scott, meaning more tax revenues for the state. The bad news, a drop in oil and gas production will keep severance tax collections down.
The severance taxes on oil and natural gas alone make up almost 50% of the total amount collected by the Department of Revenue and the Mineral Board. And when that big a lump is dropping significantly, you have to have substantial increases in the smaller collections, such as sales taxes and income taxes, just to offset the drops in the big lump. And that's why we're not going to be able to rely on just the simple growth in the sales tax and income tax that occurs with economic recovery to save us. It's just not enough growth.
In the past, Governor-elect Edwards has backed a change in the formula for collecting severance tax on natural gas as a way to bring the state more money. Lauren Scott says higher natural gas prices triggered by deregulation will make legislators wary of a plan that would charge producers based on the price of the fuel rather than the quantity produced.
The problem here is that we have this major petrochemical chemical industry in Louisiana that relies very heavily upon natural gas as a raw material and as a feedstock and as a clean boiler fuel. That industry is already suffering from some serious competitive pressures from other countries and from chemical industries in other states. If we put the natural gas severance tax on a percentage of value basis, that's going to raise their cost even more. And I think that's one of the main reasons why legislators are really not thinking about that particular tool as a new revenue enhancer.
Without the help of a rich oil and gas industry to bear a large part of the tax burden, it seems individual taxpayers in Louisiana were given this special session just a taste of what is to come. The Christmas spirit may be staying well into 1984 in Baton Rouge. It appears that if the people of Louisiana want to receive the kind of state government they've been promised, they will have to give the state the money power to do it.
That's our show for tonight, but before we go, I'd like to congratulate Beth for a special award she received this week. Beth has been named Communicator of the Year by the Baton Rouge chapter of the Public Relations Association of Louisiana for her work here at Louisiana Public Broadcasting. And Beth getting a big kiss from her husband. Congratulations.
Thank you, Ken, and thank you for joining us on Louisiana, the State We're In. Good night.
Funding for the production of Louisiana, the State We're In, is provided in part by the Ziegler Foundation of Jennings and Gulf States Utilities, helping Louisiana bridge the gap to our energy future.